We've got to make Köpenick by 1:45. We should do it easily." For a time Liz said nothing. She stared through the windshield down the empty road, confused and lost in a labyrinth of half-formed thoughts. A full moon had risen, and the frost hovered in long shrouds across the fields. They turned onto an autobahn. "Was I on your conscience, Alec?" she said at last. "Is that why you made Munt let me go?" Lemus said nothing. "You and Munt are enemies, aren't you?" Still he said nothing. He was driving fast now. The speedometer showed 120 kilometers. The autobahn was pitted and bumpy. He had his headlights on full, she noticed, and didn't bother to dip for oncoming traffic on the other lane. He drove roughly, leaning forward, his elbows almost on the wheel. "What will happen to Fiedler?" Liz asked suddenly, and this time Lemus answered. "He'll be shot." "Then why didn't they shoot you?" Liz continued quickly. "You conspired with Fiedler against Munt. That's what they said. You killed a guard. Why has Munt let you go?" "All right," Lemus shouted suddenly. I'll tell you what you are never, never to know, neither you nor I. Listen, Munt is London's man, their agent. They bought him when he was in England. We are witnessing the lousy end to a filthy, lousy operation to save Munt's skin, to save him from a clever little Jew in his own department who had begun to suspect the truth. They made us kill him. You see? Kill the Jew. Now you know, and God help us both. Chapter 25. The Wall. "If that is so, Alec," she said at last, "what was my part in all this?" Her voice was quite calm, almost matter-of-fact. "I can only guess, Liz, from what I know, and what Munt told me before we left. Fiedler suspected Munt. Had suspected him ever since Munt came back from England. He thought Munt was playing a double game. He hated him, of course, why shouldn't he? But he was right, too. Munt was London's man. Fiedler was too powerful for Munt to eliminate alone, so London decided to do it for him. I can see them working it out. They're so damned academic. I can see them sitting around a fire in one of their smart, bloody clubs. They knew it was no good just eliminating Fiedler. He might have told friends, published accusations. They had to eliminate suspicion. Public rehabilitation, that's what they organized for Munt." He swung into the left-hand lane to overtake a lorry and trailer. As he did so, the lorry unexpectedly pulled out in front of him, so that he had to brake violently on the pitted road to avoid being forced into the crash fence on his left. "They told me to frame Munt," he said simply. "They said he had to be killed, and I was game. It was going to be my last job. So I went to Seed and punched the grocer, you know all that." "And made love?" she asked quietly. Lemus shook his head. "But this is the point, you see," he continued. "Munt knew it all. He knew the plan. He had me picked up, he and Fiedler. Then he let Fiedler take over because he knew in the end Fiedler would hang himself. My job was to let them think what in fact was the truth, that Munt was a British spy." He hesitated. "Your job was to discredit me. Fiedler was shot and Munt was saved, mercifully delivered from a fascist plot. It's the old principle of love on the rebound." "But how could they know about me? How could they know we would come together?" Liz cried. "Heavens above, Alec, can they even tell when people will fall in love?" "It didn't matter. It didn't depend on that. They chose you because you were young and pretty and in the party, because they knew you would come to Germany if they rigged an invitation. That man in the Labour Exchange, Pitt, he sent me up there. They knew I'd work at the library. Pitt was in the service during the war, and they squared him, I suppose. They only had to put you and me in contact even for a day. It didn't matter. Then afterwards they could call on you, send you the money, make it look like an affair, even if it wasn't. Don't you see? Make it look like an infatuation, perhaps. The only material point was that after bringing us together they should send you money, as if it came at my request. As it was, we made it very easy for them." "Yes, we did." And then she added, "I feel dirty, Alec, as if I'd been put out to stud." Lemus said nothing. "Did it ease your department's conscience at all, exploiting somebody in the party, rather than just anybody?" Liz continued. Lemus said, "Perhaps. They don't really think in those terms. It was an operational convenience." "I might have stayed in that prison, mightn't I? That's what Munt wanted, wasn't it? He saw no point in taking the risk. I might have heard too much, guessed too much. After all, Fiedler was innocent, wasn't he? But then he's a Jew," she added excitedly, "so that doesn't matter so much, does it?" "Oh, for God's sake!" Lemus exclaimed. "It seems odd that Munt let me go, all the same, even as part of the bargain with you," she mused. "I'm a risk now, aren't I? When we get back to England, I mean, a party member, knowing all this, it doesn't seem logical that he should let me go." "I expect," Lemus replied, "he's going to use our escape to demonstrate to the Presidium that there are other Fiedlers in his department who must be hunted down." "And other Jews?" "It gives him a chance to secure his position," Lemus replied curtly. "By killing more innocent people? It doesn't seem to worry you much." "Of course it worries me. It makes me sick with shame and anger and... But I've been brought up differently, Liz. I can't see it in black and white. People who play this game take risks. Fiedler lost and Munt won. London won. That's the point. It was a foul operation, but it's paid off, and that's the only rule." As he spoke, his voice rose until finally he was nearly shouting. "You're trying to convince yourself," Liz cried. "They've done a wicked thing. How can you kill Fiedler? He was good, Alec. I know he was. And Munt—" "What the hell are you complaining about?" Lemus demanded roughly. "Your party's always at war, isn't it? Sacrificing the individual to the mass. That's what it says. Socialist reality, fighting night and day. The relentless battle, that's what they say, isn't it? At least you survived. I never heard that communists preach the sanctity of human life. Perhaps I've got it wrong," he added sarcastically. "I agree. Yes, I agree you might have been destroyed. That was in the cards. Munt's a vicious swine. He saw no point in letting you survive. His promise, I suppose he gave a promise to do his best by you, isn't worth a great deal. So you might have died, today, next year, or 20 years from now, in a prison in the workers' paradise. And so might I. But I seem to remember the party is aiming at the destruction of a whole class. Or have I got it wrong?" Extracting a packet of cigarettes from his jacket, he handed her 2, together with a box of matches. Her fingers trembled as she lit them and passed one back to Lemus. "You've thought it all out, haven't you?" she asked. "We happen to fit the mould," Lemus persisted, "and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the others, too, the others who fit the mould. But don't complain about the terms, Liz. They're party terms. A small price for a big return. One sacrificed for many. It's not pretty, I know, choosing who it'll be, turning the plan into people." She listened in the darkness, for a moment scarcely conscious of anything except the vanishing road before them and the numb horror in her mind. "But they let me love you," she said at last. "And you let me believe in you and love you." "They used us," Lemus replied pitilessly. "They cheated us both because it was necessary. It was the only way. Fiedler was bloody nearly home already, don't you see? Munt would have been caught. Can't you understand that?" "How can you turn the world upside down?" Liz shouted suddenly. "Fiedler was kind and decent. He was only doing his job, and now you've killed him. Munt is a spy and a traitor, and you protect him. Munt is a Nazi. Do you know that? He hates Jews. What side are you on? How can you—" "There's only one law in this game," Lemus retorted. "Munt is their man. He gives them what they need. That's easy enough to understand, isn't it? Leninism, the expediency of temporary alliances. What do you think spies are? Priests? Saints and martyrs? They're a squalid procession of vain fools, traitors too, yes, pansies, sadists and drunkards, people who play cowboys and Indians to brighten their rotten lives. You think they sit like monks in London, balancing the rights and wrongs? I'd have killed Munt if I could. I hate his guts, but not now. It so happens that they need him. They need him so that the great moronic mass you admire can sleep soundly in their beds at night. They need him for the safety of ordinary, crummy people like you and me." "What about Fiedler? Don't you feel anything for him?" "This is a war," Lemus replied. "It's graphic and unpleasant because it's fought on a tiny scale at close range, fought with a wastage of innocent life sometimes, I admit, but it's nothing at all besides other wars, the last or the next." "Oh, God," said Liz softly. "You don't understand. You don't want to. You're trying to persuade yourself. It's far more terrible what they're doing. To find the humanity in people, in me and whoever else they use, to turn it like a weapon in their hands and use it to hurt and kill." "Christ almighty!" Lemus cried. "What else have men done since the world began? I don't believe in anything, don't you see? Not even destruction or anarchy. I'm sick of killing, but I don't see what else they can do. They don't proselytize, they don't stand in pulpits or on party platforms and tell us to fight for peace or for God or whatever it is. They are the poor sods who try to keep the preachers from blowing each other sky high. You're wrong, Liz declared hopelessly. They're more wicked than all of us. Because I made love to you when you thought I was a tramp? Lemus asked savagely. Because of their contempt, Liz replied. Contempt for what is real and good. Contempt for love. Contempt for... Yes, Lemus agreed, suddenly weary. That is the price they pay. To despise God and Karl Marx in the same sentence. If that is what you mean. It makes you the same, Liz continued. The same as Munt and all the rest. I should know. I was the one who was kicked about, wasn't I? By them, by you, because you don't care. Only Fiedler didn't. But the rest of you, you all treated me as if I was nothing. Just currency to pay with. You're all the same, Alec. Oh, Liz, he said desperately. For God's sake, believe me, I hate it. I hate it all. I'm tired. But it's the world, it's mankind that's gone mad. We're a tiny price to pay. But everywhere's the same. People cheated and misled, whole lives thrown away, people shot and in prison, whole groups and classes of men written off for nothing. And you, your party, God knows it was built on the bodies of ordinary people. You've never seen men die, as I have, Liz. As he spoke, Liz remembered the drab prison courtyard and the wardress saying, It is a prison for those who slow down the march, for those who think they have the right to err. Lemus was suddenly tense, peering forward through the windshield. In the headlights of the car, Liz discerned a figure standing in the road. In his hand was a tiny light, which he turned on and off as the car approached. That's him, Lemus muttered, switched off the headlights and engine and coasted silently forward. As they drew up, Lemus leaned back and opened the rear door. Liz did not turn around to look at him as he got in. She was staring stiffly forward, down the street at the falling rain. "Drive at 30 kilometers, the man said. His voice was taut, frightened. I'll tell you the way. When we reach the place, you must get out and run to the wall. The searchlight will be shining at the point where you must climb. Stand in the beam of the searchlight. When the beam moves away, begin to climb. You will have 90 seconds to get over. You go first," he said to Lemus, "and the girl follows. There are iron rungs in the lower part. After that, you must pull yourself up as best you can. You have to sit on top and pull the girl up. Do you understand?" "We understand," said Lemus. "How long have we got?" "If you drive at 30 kilometers, we shall be there in about 9 minutes. The searchlight will be on the wall at 1:05 exactly. They can give you 90 seconds, not more." "What happens after 90 seconds?" Lemus asked. "They can only give you 90 seconds," the man repeated. "Otherwise it is too dangerous. Only one detachment has been briefed. They think you are being infiltrated into West Berlin. They've been told not to make it too easy. 90 seconds are enough." "I bloody well hope so," said Lemus dryly. "What time do you make it?" "I checked my watch with the sergeant in charge of the detachment," the man replied. A light went on and off briefly in the back of the car. "It is 12:48. We must leave at 5 to 1. 7 minutes to wait." They sat in total silence, save for the rain pattering on the roof. The cobblestone road reached out straight before them, staged by dingy streetlights every 100 meters. There was no one about. Above them the sky was lit with the unnatural glow of arc lights. Occasionally the beam of a searchlight flickered overhead and disappeared. Far to the left, Lemus caught sight of a fluctuating light just above the skyline, constantly altering in strength, like the reflection of a fire. "What's that?" he asked, pointing towards it. "Information service," the man replied. "A scaffolding of lights. It flashes news headlines into East Berlin." "Of course," Lemus muttered. They were very near the end of the road. "There is no turning back," the man continued. "He told you that? There is no second chance." "I know," Lemus replied. "If something goes wrong, if you fall or get hurt, don't turn back. They shoot on sight within the area of the wall. You must get over." "We know," Lemus repeated. "He told me. From the moment you get out of the car, you are in the area." "We know. Now shut up," Lemus retorted. And then he added, "Are you taking the car back?" "As soon as you get out of the car, I shall drive it away. It is a danger for me, too," the man replied. "Too bad," said Lemus dryly. Again there was silence. Then Lemus asked, "You have a gun?" "Yes," said the man, "but I can't give it to you. He said I shouldn't give it to you, that you were sure to ask for it." Lemus laughed quietly. "You would," he said. Lemus pulled the starter. With a noise that seemed to fill the street, the car moved slowly forward. They had gone about 300 yards when the man whispered excitedly, "Go right here, then left." They swung into a narrow side street. There were empty market stalls on either side so that the car barely passed between them. "Left here, now." They turned again, fast, this time between two tall buildings into what looked like a cul-de-sac. There was washing strung across the street, and Liz wondered whether they would pass under it. As they approached what seemed to be the dead end, the man said, "Left again, follow the path." Lemus mounted the curb, crossed the pavement, and they followed a broad footpath bordered by a broken fence to their left and a tall windowless building to their right. They heard a shout from somewhere above them, a woman's voice, and Lemus muttered, "Oh, shut up," as he steered clumsily around a right-angle bend in the path and came almost immediately upon a major road. "Which way?" he demanded. "Straight across, past the chemist, between the chemist and the post office. There." The man was leaning so far forward that his face was almost level with theirs. He pointed now, reaching past Lemus, the tip of his finger pressed against the windshield. "Get back!" Lemus hissed. "Get your hand away! How the hell can I see if you wave your hand around like that?" Slamming the car into first gear, he drove fast across the wide road. Glancing to his left, he was astonished to glimpse the plump silhouette of the Brandenburg Gate 300 yards away, and the sinister grouping of military vehicles at the foot of it. "Where are we going?" asked Lemus suddenly. "We're nearly there. Go slowly now. Left! Left! Go left!" he cried, and Lemus jerked the wheel in the nick of time. They passed under a narrow archway into a courtyard. Half the windows were missing or boarded up. The empty doorways gaped sightlessly at them. At the other end of the yard was an open gateway. "Through there," came the whispered command, urgent in the darkness. "Then hard right. You'll see a street lamp on your right. The one beyond it is broken. When you reach the second lamp, switch off the engine and coast until you see a fire hydrant. That's the place." "Why the hell didn't you drive yourself?" "He said you should drive. He said it was safer." They passed through the gate and turned sharply to the right. They were in a narrow street, pitch dark. "Lights out!" Lemus switched off the car lights, drove slowly forward toward the first street lamp. Ahead they could just see the second. It was unlit. Switching off the engine, they coasted silently past it, until 20 yards ahead of them they discerned the dim outline of the fire hydrant. Lemus braked. The car rolled to a standstill. "Where are we?" Lemus whispered. "We crossed the Leninallee, didn't we?" "Greifswalder Strasse. Then we turned north. We're north of Bernauer Strasse." "Pankow?" "Just about. Look." The man pointed down a side street to the left. At the far end they saw a brief stretch of wall, grey-brown in the weary arc-light. Along the top ran a triple strand of barbed wire. "How will the girl get over the wire?" "It's already cut where you climb. There's a small gap. You have 1 minute to reach the wall. Goodbye." They got out of the car, all three of them. Lemus took Liz by the arm, and she started from him as if he had hurt her. "Goodbye," said the German. Lemus just whispered, "Don't start that car till we're over." Liz looked at the German for a moment in the pale light. She had a brief impression of a young, anxious face, the face of a boy trying to be brave. "Goodbye," said Liz. She disengaged her arm and followed Lemus across the road and into the narrow street that led toward the wall. As they entered the street they heard the car start up behind them, turn and move quickly away in the direction they had come. "Pull up the ladder, you bastard," Lemus muttered, glancing back at the retreating car. Liz hardly heard him. Chapter 26. In from the cold. They walked quickly, Lemus glancing over his shoulder from time to make sure she was following. As he reached the end of the alley he stopped, drew into the shadow of a doorway and looked at his watch. 2 minutes, he whispered. She said nothing. She was staring straight ahead toward the wall and the black ruins rising behind it. 2 minutes, Lemus repeated. Before them was a strip of 30 yards. It followed the wall in both directions. Perhaps 70 yards to their right was a watchtower. The beam of its searchlight played along the strip. The thin rain hung in the air so that the light from the arc lamps was sallow and chalky, screening the world beyond. There was no one to be seen, not a sound. An empty stage. The watchtower's searchlight began feeling its way along the wall toward them, hesitant. Each time it rested they could see the separate bricks and the careless lines of mortar hastily put on. As they watched, the beam stopped, immediately in front of them. Lemus looked at his watch. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Taking her arm, he began walking deliberately across the strip. Liz wanted to run, but he held her so tightly that she could not. They were halfway toward the wall now, the brilliant semicircle of light drawing them forward, the beam directly above them. Lemus was determined to keep Liz very close to him, as if he were afraid that Munt would not keep his word and somehow snatch her away at the last moment. They were almost at the wall when the beam darted to the north, leaving them momentarily in total darkness. Still holding Liz's arm, Lemus guided her forward, blindly, his left hand reaching ahead of him until suddenly he felt the coarse, sharp contact of the cinder brick. Now he could discern the wall, and looking upward the triple strand of wire and the cruel hooks which held it. Metal wedges, like climbers' pitons, had been driven into the brick. Seizing the highest one, Lemus pulled himself quickly upward until he had reached the top of the wall. He tugged sharply at the lower strand of wire, and it came toward him, already cut. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "Start climbing." Laying himself flat, he reached down, grasped her upstretched hand, and began drawing her slowly upward as her foot found the first metal rung. Suddenly the whole world seemed to break into flame. From everywhere, from above and beside them, massive lights converged, bursting upon them with savage accuracy. Lemus was blinded. He turned his head away, wrenching wildly at Liz's arm. Now she was swinging free. He thought she had slipped, and he called frantically, still drawing her upwards. He could see nothing, only a mad confusion of colour dancing in his eyes. Then came the hysterical wail of sirens, orders frantically shouted. Half kneeling astride the wall, he grasped both her arms in his and began dragging her to him inch by inch, himself on the verge of falling. Then they fired, single rounds, 3 or 4, and he felt her shudder. Her thin arms slipped from his hands. He heard a voice in English from the western side of the wall. "Jump, Alec! Jump, man!" Now everyone was shouting, English, French, and German mixed. He heard Smiley's voice from quite close. "The girl! Where's the girl?" Shielding his eyes, he looked down at the foot of the wall, and at last he managed to see her lying still. For a moment he hesitated. Then quite slowly he climbed back down the same rungs until he was standing beside her. She was dead. Her face was turned away, her black hair drawn across her cheek as if to protect her from the rain. They seemed to hesitate before firing again. Someone shouted an order, and still no one fired. Finally they shot him, 2 or 3 shots. He stood, glaring around him like a blinded bull in the arena. As he fell, Lemus saw a small car smashed between great lorries, and the children waving cheerfully through the window.
The end. You've been listening to The Spy Who Came In From the Cold by John le Carré, narrated by Frank Muller. If you've enjoyed this book and this performance, Recorded Books recommends Our Man in Havana by Graham Greene, narrated by Simon Preble. Into an ordinary vacuum cleaner salesman's life slithers the Secret Service with a not-so-ordinary proposition, and Wormold, high on incredulity but low on cash, accepts the offer. A $300 a month assignment as England's new man in Havana. To keep the job and, more importantly, the cash flowing, Wormold fabricates non-existent agents, fake expense accounts, false stories, even a phony weapons conspiracy. But the stakes change when people start turning up murdered. You find a wide selection of titles in the Recorded Books catalogue, including bestsellers, mysteries, classics, histories, and more. So to order another recorded book, or for a copy of our latest listing, please call the toll-free number found on the back of this book. Don't forget to ask about easy 30-day rentals by mail. On our website, you can browse our catalogue, place orders, hear about our latest releases, or tune into narrator profiles and author interviews. So visit us there at www.recordedbooks.com. And thank you for being a Recorded Books reader.